Washing Up Will by Jenny Moore. Illustrated by Floss Pottage. Chapter 1. Will the Washing Up Fairy had been looking forward to watching baking magic all day, but as soon as he turned on the television, his phone rang. Dring, 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 dring. Oh, Bravo grumbled. Well, I hope it's a wrong number, but it wasn't. It was his bossy boss, Mrs. Sparkle. Ringing was a job for him. I'm sending you to help the Beck family, said Mrs. Sparkle. Their dirty dishes are getting out of control. Okay, Will agreed. Can I finish watching my baking show first? They're making biscuits and fairy cakes tonight. Mrs. Sparkle snorted. Baking shows, fairy cakes, ridiculous. You're a washing up fairy, not a cooking fairy. Off you go now. There, the Becks have just gone to bed, so be quiet. We don't want them to seeing you. And no dropping the dishes this time or there'll be trouble. Will switched off the television with a sign. Not more washing up. What if the soapy soot made his fingers slippery again? What if he smashed another cup? What if he cracked another plate? Why couldn't he be a cooking fairy instead? Chapter 2. The Beck family lived in a big pink house at the end of a long road. Will could hear loud snoring coming from upstairs as he flew in through the cat flap. The kitchen was in a terrible mess. Will had never seen so many dirty dishes. There were dirty knives and forks sitting on dirty plates. There were dirty spoons resting in dirty bowls. There were splashes of tomato sauce on the walls and lumps on macaroni cheese stuck to the floor. There were even spots of chocolate icing on the teapot. Will pulled on his yellow rubber gloves and flew across to the sink. Oh dear, it was full of muddy shoes and boots. How could we wash up in that? This calls for a bit of fairy magic, he said, waving his yellow fingers over the sink. Come on, Boots, out you get. It's not your turn for washing yet. Ow! A filthy football boot banged into Will's knee. Ouch! A tatty trainer bumped him on the head. Oof! A wet welly smacked him on the nose. At last the sink was clear. Will filled it with hot water and bubbles and got to work. Be careful, he reminded himself. No dropping, no smashing, no cracking. Otherwise, there'll be trouble, big trouble. Chapter 3. He rubbed the mugs and glasses until they gleamed. He scrubbed the plates and bowls until they shone. He scraped the pots and pans until they sparkled even with fairy magic. stairs. It was hard work. At least I haven't broke anything yet, he said. I must be getting better. Will wiped sauce off the walls. He peeled macaroni cheese off the floor. He picked runaway raisins out of the cat's fur. He was just cleaning chocolate icing off the teapot when he spotted something. Mrs. Beck's cookbook. 100 recipes for terrible cooks. We'll read, I wonder if there is a recipe for fairy cakes in here. He opened the cover, knocking the teapot on the floor with a giant crash. Oh no, said Will, looking at the broken bits of china. Not again! What was that noise? Came a loud shout. Will heard heavy footsteps clumping down the stairs. Clomp, clomp, clomp. Oh dear, said Will. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What will Mrs. Sparkle say when she finds out? He zoomed back through the cat flap before anyone spotted him, but he could hear Mrs. Beck crying in the kitchen. Oh no, my teapot, she sobbed. That was a present for my auntie. Will felt terrible. He wanted to say sorry, but washing up fairies were supposed to work in secret. He couldn't let the Becks see him on Mrs. Sparkle. Would be even crosser. Will flew home and went straight to bed. He wasn't in the mood for baking shows anymore, but he couldn't sleep. He still felt bad about the broken teapot. If only there was another way of showing how sorry he was, a secret way. That's when he had his brilliant idea. Chapter 4. Will could hear snoring from upstairs as he flew in through the Beck's cat flap. Mr. and Mrs. Beck must have swept up the bits of broken teapot and gone back to bed, but they'd forgotten to tidy up the cookbook. Perfect, said Will. He fetched a nice clean bowl from the cupboard and a freshly washed wooden spoon. He collected flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. Will hummed happily as he stirred and whisked. He tipped the mixture into fairy cake cases and popped them in the oven to cook. They smelled delicious. Will drizzled the finished fairy cakes with icing and rainbow sprinkles, singing to himself as he worked. He was so busy singing, he didn't notice the snoring sound had stopped. He didn't hear the footsteps clumping down the stairs. He didn't hear the kitchen door creaking open. Who are you? Asked Mrs. Beck. What are you doing in our kitchen? Demanded Mrs. Beck. Ooh, fairy cakes, said the Beck twins. Can we have one? Will's lip trembled. His fairy knees began to knock. I'm Will, the washing up fairy, he said. Mrs. Sparkle sent me to help with your dirty dishes, but I broke your teapot by mistake. I wasn't making you some cakes to say sorry. A washing up fairy? Repeated Mrs. Beck, looking for confused. Who's said Mrs. Speck, looking dazzled. What flavor icing is that? Asked the twins, looking hungry. Chapter 5. It was almost time for baking magic, but Will the washing up fairy was too worried to watch television. What would Mrs. Sparkle say when she heard about the teapot? What would she say when she discovered he'd been spotted? Dring, 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 dring! Oh no, said Will. I hope it's a wrong number, but it wasn't. Hello, boomed a bossy voice at the other end on the line. It's Mrs. Sparkle here. Will's tummy grew tight. His fairy teeth began to chatter. I suppose you've heard about Mrs. Beck's teapot, he said. I didn't mean to break it, and I didn't mean for the Becks to catch me in their kitchen. I'm really sorry. It must be the world's worst washing up fairy, but it won't happen again, I promise. No, agreed Mrs. Sparkle. You're right. It won't happen again. No more washing up for you. You'll have to find a new job instead. Poor Will didn't know what to say. What would he do now? But Mrs. Sparkle hadn't finished yet. And I know just the thing, she added. The Beck family said your fairy cakes were the nicest they'd ever tasted. They'd like you to come and work for them as a cooking fairy instead. If you do the cooking, baking, they'll do the washing up afterwards. How does that sound? It sounded brilliant, said Will. Thanks, Mrs. Sparkle. Will the cooking fairy said goodbye and settled back into his armchair with a big grin on his face. Time for baking magic, he said, switching on the television. The end.